Thank you, Dr. Krauser. We'll keep tonight's report short, sweet, and to the point. We're going to be going through the same agenda we typically go through, covering the design progress and updates, probable cost updates, and the schedule updates. So next slide. The last 4 weeks, we met on the intermediate school. We had department meetings. Those are the large-scale meetings. Re-meeting with the STEM, music, art, media, and food service departments. We are re-meeting with some of these groups because we had changes that we wanted to incorporate, get their feedback, update again. And with some of those groups, as I'll mention, the next 4 weeks we'll be meeting with again to receive additional input. We had administrative meetings on 5/13 and 5/28, one of those being earlier today. Those are to talk about large building decisions, update from those department meetings, and make sure the administrative team is fully abreast of all changes and updates resulting from those. And then we have our ongoing weekly design team coordination meetings. Those are with all the consultants, the design team, and the interior design team. The K&W, our civil engineers, submitted the land development submission on 5/16/2024. So that was, I guess, about a week and a half ago. And then as far as the high school, that project is on hold until the petrographic testing is approved and we receive results, and we can proceed with better recommendations on the structure of the pool. For the next 4 weeks, we'll be meeting again, having more large-scale meetings to review plans. Those include STEM, media, performing arts, physical education, and OTPT. We will again continue to have our weekly design coordination meetings, and that we have a design development submission due at 100% coming up at the end of this week. So we'll be issuing drawings to the district administrative staff and facility staff for incorporation and review, as well as the owner's rep, Fidavia. Design development cost update will happen within the next 2 weeks, and the high school natatorium, hopefully if the petrographic testing is approved, we'll be able to get those results and provide recommendations. Next, please. This is just the development of the civil plan as submitted for the land development submission. There's no major changes here. This is essentially the same plan that was reviewed in our last meeting, just developed a little bit further. Nothing major to change here unless the board had any questions or any comments related to the site plan. Okay. The land development submission was submitted to the township. The traffic, I do have the traffic impact study there as the last item. It is in the process of being completed. As I mentioned, there was a robust package associated with that as far as intersections to study. And that was noted to the township to be received by the township before the planning commission meeting, but was not available at the time of submission. All right, next slide. So the budget update here, we do not have a budget update today. The reason for that, I talked to John Badia, the managing partner of Crabtree. He is the one that put the original budget together. He recommended that we hold off for another week and a half to 2 weeks. The reason for that, we are receiving about 7 or 8 different bid projects, many of them being of similar scope and size to this project. And we would like to use active, real, up-to-date estimate numbers based on real bids being received in today's numbers to update the budget instead of me using numbers that are a couple months old. It doesn't seem like a week and a half is too long to wait, but I just want to make sure we have accurate information. I know at the last meeting I mentioned I'd be coming tonight with a budget update, and originally I had planned on it, but all those bids had gotten slipped 2 weeks in the bidding process, so that put it after this update, not before this update. Does that make sense?
So when then would you anticipate those figures?
The next meeting. So typically, as I mentioned previously, we do budget updates at the completion of each design phase, and design development is wrapping up at the end of this week. So I had hoped, because of the meeting scheduled, I'd have that information at this meeting, being it's only a couple days away. But again, since the bid windows for those other projects got pushed back, we don't have the results to compare them to.
So question for you, and I asked a specific question last meeting about, and I call it fluff, but we'll call it overage.
And I do have that as the last item up there on
Perfect.
that slide.
You're going to give me that update. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, since you asked that, let's just go ahead and jump into it. The reason I couldn't give you an answer back then, I have to take the actual supplemental services, go to the spreadsheet, compare what was in the budget for the spreadsheet, subtract out the supplemental services, that gives us what was left over. So what we had in the budget spreadsheet was $305,000 for civil-related services. Supplemental services from K&W totaled $273,565, leaving $31,000 $435 for additional efforts required by the township. Now, we typically see townships require items that are above and beyond the normal scope of services for civil engineers, which is why we budget for a reasonable amount of additional services so that the district in this case is not left holding the bag on expenses that were not budgeted for. Now, we had anticipated the traffic study to come in at 5 to 7 intersections, which is what TNG, K&W, and the township had discussed, the township's engineer. The township decided to expand that to 14 intersections. So what was budgeted was $20,000 for that traffic study. The 14 intersections comes out to a traffic study resulting in $38,930, meaning it's $7,495 over what was budgeted for all additional services for civil-related items. That essentially means, yes, that portion of the project, that portion of the budget, did not meet the expectations, or should I say not the expectation. The expectations exceeded what we anticipated going into a project where there was already a school site. We wouldn't have anticipated that deep of a study into the traffic. What it also means is that if the township does require additional civil services beyond a typical scope, those will also be in excess of the original budget allocated for civil-related services.
Okay, so we're kind of bumping up against, or not we, your budget is bumping up against what the total amount is. Is that what I'm hearing?
As far as what we budgeted for
Yeah.
civil
Yeah.
and what's being required by the township, yes, it is in excess of what we had budgeted.
Okay. And then in the 43.5 to 44.7, do you have a number around overage on that? Is there overage already baked into that number, or is that the number that?
When you're saying overage, what specifically are you referring to?
Come on, Seth.
What I can say is exactly what I said.
Excess budgeted items over what the cost of the plan is. So, for example, when you have a traffic impact study that's 14 intersections instead of 5, you have overage built into that. You have two numbers here, 43.5 million to 44.7 million. How much overage is baked into those numbers? You don't need to give me like $2.34 million. Like, is it 10%? Is it 15%? How much overage is baked into those numbers?
I'm going to ask you to hold on that only because when we come back, and I'm sorry to ask you to hold again, when we come back with the full design development budget, you're going to see a full breakdown of soft costs, construction related, soft costs, non-construction related. And you'll see where it's broken out as far as professional services. You're going to see where it's broken out as far as construction related, which includes contingencies for design and contingencies for construction. So there's going to be more detail at that meeting where we break out the numbers more than just the overall project number that you've seen today.
And I get you're going to get me the exact numbers on this, but again, we've made decisions. We've issued 2 bonds now. We're about ready to vote on a 3.5% tax increase. We only have the numbers that you've presented us here. And in the budgeted items and in the 5-year outlook that's been presented by Mrs. Chichuli as the prior finance officer, now we'll have a conversation in a few minutes. We're looking at deficits running out, and the only numbers we have to go on are what you have presented. So let me back up a little bit. When you do your numbers here, do you review these with the administration, and do they approve your presentations?
The numbers are reviewed with the administration before ever presented.
So, Dr. Krauser, you're fully aware of these. So, like, for example, when we looked at the 10-year capital outlook, and there was that $5 million error that was discovered, how did that happen? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to, we're making financial decisions and we're looking at numbers here. And I'm asking a simple question about what is the overage in these numbers. I know you'll update it, kind of like what people out in the public are updating with their tax projections. They go off the information that's currently available. What overage number do you have in here, or do you not know that answer?
I'm not going to be able to say that off the top of my head. Again, this is a budget that was prepared by John Badia, the managing partner of the firm.
Okay.
It was prepared a while ago. And I'm only saying I can't pull it off the top of my head because I'm not intimately involved in exactly what factor he plugged in each.
How many meetings have you come up and presented here? And I ask you exactly what is on these slides. I'll count 5. And in one meeting, you said to me when I was asking about the pool estimate, I said, how much is that going to cost? And you said to me, Mr. Sanders, I knew you were going to ask that question. So I said to you at the last meeting, what is the overage in the numbers? I sent an email to Dr. Krauser, and I said, Dr. Krauser, I'm expecting an answer to the overage number. Now you're telling me you can't tell me what the overage number is in this. So that leads me, as somebody who's asking questions, either you don't know it because you don't know it, you're being told not to tell us, which I hope's not the case, you're unprepared, which I don't think that's the case, or these numbers aren't good. I don't know what the answer is there, but it's somewhere in that mix right there. But if you knew I was going to come in here and ask about it, I would have been prepared to answer it. So once again, I'm asking a question. Now we're counting them 6 times. I've asked the specific question about a specific slide. I'm not coming out of left field with these questions. I've reiterated my question to Dr. Krauser. So to not have that answer for me now is, it's professionally.
Mr.
I'm
Sanders,
not
I
going to say
believe,
it.
Mr. Sanders, I believe he's agreed. Mr. Wentz has
Oh, I know what he's
agreed
agreed to,
get
Doctor
to
or Madam President.
to
That's
get
not the
you
point
the
of my question.
number. Wait, I
That's
think
not
you,
the point of my
but
question.
I think you've made your point.
Well, you may have thought that, but the public needs to hear it.
I'm sure they understand.
Nah, not all of them do. There's
Mr.
a lot of
Wentz,
people
could you
that don't.
please continue?
And Mr. Sanders, to be fair, the specific question you asked last week was related specifically to the traffic study and the civil related services, which is what was answered this evening. So I apologize if you expected that to be a more robust answer, but in that moment, in preparation of this meeting, I believed that was the question you had asked.
Okay.
As far as the schedule, the very last slide, we are tracking on the schedule that was presented at the last meeting. We are wrapping up 100% design development at the end of this month on the 30th. And this is for the building and design schedule. So that would be 100% design development at the end of this month. Proceeding through 50% construction documents mid-July, that would be 7/18. We would anticipate, if the schedule holds, be able to have an August Act 34 hearing, and then a 95% and 100% construction documents wrapping up in September. Again, at the completion of each one of those phases, we would have a budget estimate update. And then as far as the 100% construction document set, that would be targeted at the 95% set, since 100% doesn't give you a chance to make any modifications. So you would expect a budget update at that date as well. Bidding, again, is still slated for September and concluding in October at the end of the month. Any other additional questions?
Anything for Mr. Wentz?
I just had one question about the testing that we're doing on the pool after it's approved. Do we know how long it will take for that testing to be completed?
I don't have an exact number on that. I know the testing company out in the Midwest is giddy to get started on it. They actually reached out to me today saying, if you don't approve this soon, we're going to send back your cores. And I said, please don't do that. So I know they're looking forward to it. They're interested in getting those off their plate.
Mrs. San Martin?
Yes, thank you. You said in a week and a half, Mr. Padilla will have more concrete numbers once he has comparable bids. I'm asking that he or you email the board so that we have that information readily available when we make our decisions. Are you able to do that?
You're asking for the budget updates ahead of the next meeting?
Yes, so we can review it ahead of time. Thank you.
And could you share about the traffic study? I understand there was I don't know if it was a snafu or an issue with its submission, or I'm not, just talk to me about the traffic study as it pertains to the township, please.
Sure. So it is pretty typical when submissions are made, especially when late requests are made by a township. For example, TRG, the consultant for the civil engineer that takes care of the traffic study, had coordinated with the civil engineer for the township, and they had agreed on a 5 to 7 intersection scope. I believe the township themselves expanded that to the 14 intersections. So there wasn't a lot of time for the civil engineer and the traffic engineer to respond to that in preparation for the submission that had already been planned. In addition to that, that schedule had already been shared with the township. Shared with the township at the sketch plan review meeting, which was several months ago, and there was no concern at that point in time about a schedule. When the submission was made on the 16th for the land development submission, John Luciani from the township, the civil engineer, did indicate, email K&W that he did not receive the traffic study. I do not know the conversations immediately back and forth between K&W and John Luciani, but I believe there was an understanding that it would be accepted as a deferred submittal, as is typical for many of those items that don't affect the site itself. So again, the traffic study is outside the site. There's plenty to review on the site. And I have an email and phone calls into K&W to confirm that any conversations had happened between them. Now, the township does have the right to not accept a submission that is not full and complete, but as mentioned, traffic studies are often one of those items that are deferred because they don't immediately impact the rest of the site, the immediate boundaries within the site plan itself.
So the traffic study is complete.
The traffic study is in process.
In process. Okay.
And what was communicated to the township engineer and the township administrators was that it would be available prior to the planning committee meeting, and that planning committee meeting is, I believe, the 20th of June.
So it'll be turned in, or whatever the verbiage is, by then.
Yeah, I believe they submitted as amendment to the submission.
June what? What was the date again?
June 20th, I believe, is the planning committee meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam President, is it
Mrs. Fryrick?
Is it possible, Mr. Wentz, to get a list of all the intersections that we originally were going to look at, and then what the township requested in addition to?
I have the list of the full scope that was determined by the township. I may also have the list for the original study. I can certainly find that out if I don't have it in my inbox.
I'd appreciate if we could get that.
Yep.
You're asking for the intersections that are being studied?
Yeah, I want to see the original ones that were proposed, and then you said the township added how many more?
Essentially doubled it.
Doubled the list. Then I'd like to see the additional ones also, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yep.
And this may seem like a foolish question, but what happens during a traffic study? What is a traffic study?
So it's not performed by the civil engineer. It's performed by a consultant that does traffic studies specifically. And what they do is they take time, they study the intersections, and they develop a report on the impact that the project will have on those intersections. So several of the intersections are actually north of the site. So I'm not sure how they would be impacted, because all the traffic would be coming from the south side of the site. That's addition to the load. So if you're doubling the students, you have buses coming from a certain direction, parents coming from a certain direction. So it's just to study the intersections on how it would impact. Where's the traffic coming from? Where is it going to go? And how might you provide recommendations to control traffic to ease congestion?
I see. So in this case, the township said, let's do this one and this one, this intersection and this intersection and this intersection, and assigned that to our traffic study.
And I am the architect, not the civil engineer, but that's how I understand the conversation.
I won't. I get that. I don't mean to be, putting you on the spot. I'm way lower than an architect even. So I just trying to understand what a traffic. I don't know if they sit at the corner and watch the number of cars that go by. I'm just curious about what's involved in a traffic study, and I think you explained it. So I appreciate that. Anything else?
Thank you very much.